Hey everybody, welcome. My name is Andrew Paul Maksymowicz. I'm a motivational speaker and I have my own foundation raising money for financially burdened families impacted by cancer. And I recently just finished my first book and it's exclusively available on the Amazon Kindle. Please check it out. The name of my book is Juggling Chainsaws and I'm very excited about it, and I'm very excited about today because today I'm going to read you a chapter from Juggling Chainsaws. And before I begin, I'd like to tell you, Juggling Chainsaws reads like an open conversation. It's more like a self-help memoir than anything else, and it's very easy to read. It's an open conversation, and basically I talk about the past 10 years of my life, from my father getting sick and diagnosed with cancer, the passing, to my mother getting sick and diagnosed with cancer and then ultimately passing, and what I did with my life after. And it's just a way to easily apply my own experiences to your own experiences, and hopefully there you can mirror some of your experiences through that. So today I'm going to be reading you one of the beginning chapters in my book called You Hot Shit. So at this time I'd like you to just close your eyes and rest your head on your table or just sit there in a trance, because I'd like you to be transported away to a world that you might recognize as your own or you might think you'll recognize later. I just want you to be able to embrace yourself and engross yourself in what my experiences were. So I'm going to read You Hot Shit. They were the last 3 words I'd ever hear my father speak. He was lying in my brother's bed because it was closest to the bathroom. By now, it was mostly just about the principal, since he couldn't even stand up or even use the bathroom. I didn't know about a death rattle, except that it was the sound of fluid and cancer filling the lungs. A year before, I didn't even know about cancer, and now I am an expert in all medical realities I've had to witness and accept. My dad's battle with cancer was my crash course in life. During his final few days, people came by to see him, to look at him, and ask my mom what they could do to help. We would always say nothing. The question seemed like a nervous reaction, like, what can I do? What can you do besides bringing over a cure for cancer? Nothing. But thanks for asking. It reminded me of the "have a nice day" that's said without even thinking to every customer that passes through a grocery store's checkout. I feel like it's normal to want to help when you see somebody else in pain. I'm not upset that people wanted to help, but I think sometimes we ask questions like this already knowing, or maybe hoping, the answer will be nothing. The ones who really cared were the ones who could look at our faces or glance around the room and figure out what we needed without asking. They didn't have to ask, they came over just to be present. They made themselves available, they washed dishes or brought us some food or maybe a bottle of wine. I wonder what my dad thought about the people who came to see him in those final days before he passed away. He was a very proud man, and now lying there, encircled by friends and family who were hovering like vultures just waiting for his death. He wasn't coherent near the end. He drifted in and out of consciousness. Before my dad became sick, I couldn't fathom how aggressive cancer was. I was young, naive, until it came knocking on our door. I honestly thought the health insurance companies sent you money to help pay the bills. My father ended up working right up until the weekend he passed away. When I think back to the last few days of his life, I only remember a few certain details. I can't remember anything that happened at night. Did I leave the house at night? Maybe. I always had the hardest time coping with our situation at night. It was very isolating. I think because I was alone, and there were fewer distractions to keep my mind off the reality of what was going on at home. I can't bring my dad back. All we get to keep when we lose someone we love are the memories. I worry sometimes that mine aren't accurate, like seeing someone for the first time after years apart, and they're totally different than you've imagined. Almost a decade after my dad passed away, I wonder if my memories represent actual events, or if I've let my subjectivity fill in the blanks. Does it even matter? I think it's most important to remember that I love him. At least that will never change. He was sick for a year. I was starting my freshman year at University of Rhode Island. I crashed and burned that semester. Balancing the responsibilities of school with the stress and demands of my father's illness, Dad always took precedent, and sometimes I left in the middle of class if he needed help with anything. Most people don't consider how difficult it is adapting to a new environment when someone's 49 years old father is dying of cancer. A few days before the first day of second semester classes began, my dad's oncologist told us he was too weak to be alone at work. He had been a stonemason for almost 30 years. I knew he was too proud and too stubborn to stop working, and he'd never ask for help from his construction friends either. I made a decision, with my family's support, to stop taking day classes at the school's main campus and switch to night classes at URI's Providence campus. Attending night school meant that I could work full-time beside my dad during the day. The months we worked together were a blast. His declining health required that we take frequent breaks, which we spent talking. I learned more in those 6 months working with my dad than I did in 6 years of college. My major required that I complete a course in international political science. I enrolled in one particular class which had a solid reputation despite rumors that the professor was a tough grader. He assigned an optional 10-page essay for extra credit at the end of the semester. My grades didn't give me a choice in the matter. I had to write the paper, and it had to be great. But my professor had made it clear on the first day that he didn't give A's, and I barely had time to think about the essay with everything else that was happening at home. For the record though, I never even wanted to go to college. I had hoped to join the Marines after high school. My parents nixed that notion as we sat together on the deck one spring afternoon. I must have been almost finished with my junior year of high school. We were discussing my options for the future, and according to my mom and dad, I didn't have much say. Not going to college was not an option. They said, graduate from college. After that, you can work in fast food if that's what you want to do. But you have to have a degree in case you ever want to change your mind. My mom and dad weren't encouraged to pursue their own aspirations when they were young. Their parents never pushed them to make anything of themselves. My parents wanted my brother and I to have better lives than they did, more choices. They wanted to offer us all the opportunities that weren't available to them. They didn't want us to end up with practical, passionless careers working for employers who valued someone's degree over his work ethic, his character, and his commitment. Like most parents, mine wanted to prevent me from limiting myself. Their whole adult lives were dedicated to my brother and I and to supporting our dreams. At one point, my dad was working 2 jobs and my mom was working 3 of her own just so our family could live modestly in a small, middle-class suburban town. I didn't appreciate most of their sacrifices until after their deaths. Looking back, I am grateful that they pushed me to finish college. I wish they had a chance to follow their own dreams. My dad always wanted to build hot rods in California, and my mom wanted to be a teacher. They would have been awesome at their dream jobs. I started writing my paper about a topic my dad had suggested, the Kyoto Protocol. He was a self-educated man who kept himself informed by reading Mother Jones, The Week, Harper, all the brainy news journals. Because I knew I couldn't get an A in the class, I had no reason to apply myself or try as hard. So I accepted that mission. But I wrote the paper, turned it in, and finished the class. My final grades for the semester were available online, but I couldn't see the grade for that class on the university's website for some reason. I remember checking every few hours, getting more and more frustrated that it hadn't been posted. Ultimately, that grade didn't matter, since I had just received a letter from the dean informing me of my school's decision to kick me out due to my less than impressive academic performance. It was cut and dry, as they put it. My dad passed away on August 8th, which is Victory Over Japan Day in Rhode Island, or VJ Day for short. We are the only state in the whole country that still celebrates this racist holiday, but it happened to be that day, of all days, that my dad felt so sick that he insisted on seeing his oncologist. He wanted to make sure that his doctor would be able to meet us at the hospital if or when we had to call an ambulance. My dad was stubborn as hell, a trait I inherited from him, and since my dad's mind was set about seeing his doctor, I wasn't either. VJ Day is a state holiday, so doctors' private practices are closed for the day. and I actually drove all around the neighborhood where the oncologist lived, asking strangers on the street if they knew where the oncologist was. Sometimes our gut reactions to crises don't make sense, but we're out of options. Before we knew how sick my dad was, I was sitting on my bed checking my email. I ran from my bedroom. Mom, I finally got my grade. Into the kitchen, where I found her standing with her head in her hands. I got an A-. I hugged her without quite realizing what was happening. Her tears had soaked through my shirt before I even knew she was crying. I bolted to my brother's room, leaving her standing alone in the kitchen. I tiptoed over to where my dad was lying in the bed to tell him about my grade. I looked at him. Dad, Dad. His body was covered by just a sheet, and he was only half conscious. His eyes kept rolling backward into his head, and he was wheezing uncontrollably. Every breath sounded like deep, hollow buzzing, a constant clattering, phlegmy hum. I had never been so terrified. I didn't even know if he could still hear me as I told him the news. Dad, I got an A-, and the professor said nobody ever gets an A in his class. It was because of that Kyoto Protocol paper you helped me write. The last 3 words my dad spoke to me were the best 3 words I'd probably ever hear. They're permanently burned into my memory, and I had no idea at the time how important those 3 words would be. My dad woke from his unconsciousness state and said, "You hot shit." And a tiny smile receded back up under his bushy mustache. He passed away en route to the emergency room just a few hours later. But it was a greater goodbye than I'd ever dreamed of. I can still remember the roughness of a stubble on my cheek and the way his mustache scruff used to tickle when he kissed my forehead. Thank you everyone for listening. That was one of my chapters, You Hot Shit, available from my book on Amazon.com, Juggling Chainsaws. Thank you so much, and I look forward to talking with you soon. Take care.